I'd like to call the Heritage Center Wellington meeting to order. Welcome to 2022. My resolution for this year is to make no predictions, but we're all here anyway, and it looks like we're all healthy. We're just missing Nanette. I'm sure she'll join us momentarily. So Happy New Year, and I'm sorry we weren't able to get together in person, but hopefully that'll, I said I wasn't going to do this, but hopefully it'll be soon. Great. So any addendums and corrections to the agenda? Okay, we just had one in discussions with Devlin and Mariana. We're going to move, or we would like to move, if no one has any objections, the information items to before the subcommittee updates. So if we're all okay with that, okay, so that's then approve that change to the agenda. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interests under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Does anyone have any disclosures? Okay, none. Approval and adoption of the minutes. Any corrections? Nico?
Yes, just, and I'm wondering as to the appropriateness of this, it doesn't necessarily have to do with these minutes, but it has to do with past minutes. I was interested in a comment that Mariana had made some meetings back with regard to planning applications coming before this committee. And I was looking back in the minutes to see where that was, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And I wonder if that could just be restated for the record, just so that it's there, and then perhaps I can make a quick commentary about that. Would that be appropriate?
I'm not sure. Can you say again what it was you want Mariana to do? There
was a number of meetings back, Mariana had made reference to planning applications coming before this committee. And unless I'm wrong, maybe someone could correct me if I am, but I couldn't find it in past minutes. And I just wondered if it could just be simply be restated for the record so that it's minuted.
Well, so Mariana, do you recall, just to sort of, do you recall what Nico was discussing?
I wonder if perhaps are you referring, Nico, to when we receive notices, like when notices are put on?
Yes, sorry, when we receive.
Okay,
notices,
so when we receive a planning application, it's provided to the clerk's department for the Heritage Committee. So it would go on the agenda as basically it's a notice of application or a notice of public meeting. So the committee is aware when there is something specifically relating to heritage properties. So if an application is related to a property that has heritage resources or adjacent heritage resources where there's been heritage impact assessment prepared or heritage resources might be impacted, then I would bring that to the committee's attention through the regular course of meetings. So I would let the committee know that there is a heritage impact assessment and we would put it on the agenda, or I would let Devlin know, and then it goes on the agenda for the committee's review. Is that what you're referring to, Nico?
That's exactly what I was referring to, and I couldn't find it in previous minutes, so thank you for restating that. And I trust that it will be minuted for today's purposes. Thank you.
Okay, so that, yeah, just for my own clarification, Devlin, can that be added as a, would that be added as a discussion point under corrections to the minutes?
I'll add it as a correction or addendum to the agenda, just as a simple.
So it'll just show up as a, yeah.
As like
Okay.
under an information item.
Okay. So other than that, or including that, we then have approval of the minutes, adoption of the minutes by consensus. We're in agreement? Okay, thank you. Which brings us to consideration of reports and the partial demolition of a listed property on 377 Geddes Street in Elora. And you have an information package there. And we also, I believe, have a delegation or a property owner. Devlin?
Slowly coming in.
Okay.
Believe Cicely is the property owner.
Hello.
Hi, Cicely.
Hi.
Cicely Heslett?
Cecily Heslett. Yes,
Cecily Heslett?
that's right.
Welcome to,
Cecily with the S sound and Heslett with a Z sound.
okay, do my best.
That's fine.
Welcome. We are to our meeting at Heritage Center, Wellington. So did you want to go ahead and give us just a brief overview of what it is or do you want to wait until your consultants are here?
No, I said I would handle this on my own. I mean, maybe that was naive, but we'll find out.
No, that's fine. No, I didn't know. I'm seeing a couple other people, but maybe they're for the for another item on our agenda. So go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. Well, my husband and I own 377 Geddes Street, and we would like to knock down the garage, which is a single car garage. I think it's like brick and breeze block, and it's in rough shape. And so we would like to ask to have that removed, and then we would like to build a 2-car garage with a 2-story apartment. So an apartment, main floor of apartment behind the 2-car bays.
Yep.
And then a bedroom floor up above.
Okay, and I think
I don't have plans for that. I mean, we have like a rough idea of what that would look like, but we don't have actual official plans to submit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had when I looked at the information that came to us, it appeared like there was a drawing.
There is, that's sort of a
kind of
concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With
It's just
a floor
inspiration.
plan.
Mhm.
Okay.
So the inspiration plan is from like a Beaver Homes
Oh, I see.
book. It has the 2-car garage with the main floor at the back, but it also has essentially a 3rd bay that was like a games room. That's not part of our intention. It would just be the two bays with the main floor out the back. I think that our designer crossed off a portion of the main floor in order for it to fit within the current limitations on the square footage, but we would likely apply to have a variance so that we could have the main floor a bit bigger. But I'm assuming that's at another step in the process.
Yeah, I think it is. And we've got Mariana here who can perhaps speak to that at some point, but let's go to the, thank you for that, Ben. Let's go to the committee and see if anyone has any questions regarding the information on this proposed demolition. Don, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have too much of a question about it. I looked at your garage and it does look like it's in rough shape. So it's certainly, I can agree with that. And it's not at all attached to your heritage home either. And you do have a lovely heritage home. I'll have to compliment you on that too. And that's why you're in front of us. A lot of the other things that you're talking about is not really even our council to deal with, what you're going to, apartments and all of the other things. Right. But I just wanted to say that it is not at all attached to your heritage home. It seems to be at the back of the property. Is that how I view it?
Not at the back of the property. The property is not an exact rectangle. So the garage currently goes along the western, the northwestern sort of perimeter along the fence line. The house is sort of turned slightly. sort of lining up with the main road more. So it is, I'm guessing the distance between them is probably around from, if you were to sort of draw a line to the very closest points, I think about 15 feet if you were to like go from the corner of the house over to the corner of the garage, but that's a guess. Something like that.
And
They're
it
not
seems,
at all attached.
and it seems to be a construction from,
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Don, you muted.
sorry about that. I was just asking about the age of the garage. I know I haven't gone completely into the details.
Don, you're cutting in and out.
Oh, sorry, I was just asking about the age of the garage. I think it's in the 50s or 60s or something, or is it?
I think so. There certainly isn't any original stone. In fact, the property does have a slab at the back of the property, closer to Queen Street. And I think there used to be an old bridge off of Queen Street that would indicate that there was an old carriage house at the back. It's long gone, but the cement slab for that still exists. So my guess is the garage that used to be, associated with the house was on that slab at the back. So I don't think there's anything in this. The guess is that it's 50s, according to our designer Greg Belfort. Simply, I think based on the what he guesses the age of the materials are.
Yeah, I was just on it, wanting some clarification. I'll send it to the rest of the committee if they're interested in anything else.
Thank you, Don. Any additional questions? It sounds to me like I think everyone is fine with this application for the demolition. Then I can speak for the committee. And I think in that case, we could move to a motion. Sorry, Sherry, were you? No, okay. So the motion would be then that Heritage Center Wellington does not object to the complete, is it complete demolition or do we still say partial demolition, Devlin?
We say partial demolition of the detached garage.
Right, to the partial demolition of the detached garage at listed property 377 Geddes Street in Elora, and that the property should remain on the municipal register. So do we have a mover for that motion? Okay, I see Don, seconder. Christine, all in favor? Okay, I think that's unanimous. And the motion's carried.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I have to admit, I'm assuming that I just don't understand the difference between partial and complete.
Yeah, Devlin, I think it's still, I still think that was my, I'm a little confused on that too. Somebody, maybe Mariana, or why do we say partial?
We just call it a partial demolition because it's not the demolition of the house. So it's just to be clear to the public that it's not a full demolition here. It's a partial demolition at the property of the detached garage only is the way it would be worded in the planning report. So there would be a staff report that goes to council at the end of the month. And that's where council will make the final decision based on the committee's recommendation. And then you could apply for a permit to remove.
Thank you. That explains that perfectly. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think Mariana just gave you the context there of what's going to happen next. And then you can be in discussions with her about any other additional requests you have. So
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for what
Good
you
luck.
do. Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so that completes our consideration of reports. So as we discussed, we're going to move information items up. And our first information item is 7.1, which we had requested be included the HIA, Heritage Impact Assessment, for 350 St. Andrew Street, we requested, and in discussions we had during the past month, decided to bring this forward then as an information item for the committee. And that having appeared on our agenda, we then have the consultants who wrote the report, who wanted to be here in order to respond to any questions, and also to give us a small presentation or short presentation, which would give us some additional background to this heritage impact assessment. I just wanted to stress to the, not stress to the committee, I want to just continue with a bit of an explanation that as an information item, you're certainly, we'll have some allotment of time to ask questions, clarifications of the HIA. But we are also planning to bring this HIA back onto the agenda as a report, which would then, that we would consider and discuss fully in February. So there'll be a sort of a staging of this HIA over a couple of months, which will give us time to consider it, and also to consider any other information that's being distributed about the HIA before we have a full discussion of it at the in the February meeting. Does that process seem reasonable to everyone? Okay, and it's certainly ask whatever questions you have tonight, but I think keep in mind that this is a precursor to a fuller discussion we will have, and potentially to recommendations that we would bring in February. So just keep that in mind. I'd like to ask Mariana to just start out this information item by giving us an overview of it from the planning point of view.
Sure, thanks, Phil. So we received the application in the fall, and it was deemed complete. So then a notice of complete application was issued that was provided to the committee. The applicants did decide to do a neighborhood meeting as well. So like a public information meeting, which was held, I believe, in December, middle of December or so. And so I think a few members of the committee attended that. And that was to provide the information to the public. I just want to let the committee know that no public meeting has yet been scheduled for this. So the public meeting is the first statutory step that takes the information to the public, the application itself to council, and anybody can delegate at that meeting. So information is collected through oral and written presentations and through any information that's received during that meeting or before that meeting or after. And then staff considers all the information submitted. So the application itself, all of the studies that are submitted in support of the application, which staff is currently reviewing. And then all of the public input and agency input is also considered. So there's a statutory public meeting that gets scheduled. So that's not yet scheduled, and that will likely take place in the coming months. And then staff, upon review of all of the information received, staff would make a recommendation to council, and then council makes the decision. So that's where we're at. We're basically at the beginning of the process where we've received the application and we're currently reviewing the application and the studies completed. The HIA is one of those studies. So that's what's before the committee today. Now, the reason the HIA was requested was not due to any heritage resources on site specifically. The property is not listed or designated, but adjacent to the property are two listed properties, one on each side, the Melville Church and then another property to the west. So because of those two listed properties, staff requested a heritage impact assessment to review the impacts on that, and in light of the cultural heritage landscape study that was being worked on at the time as well. So that's the background to that, and I'm happy to answer any questions through the meeting and after the presentation, but I'll turn it back over to you, Phil, and the applicants, I think, have a presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. So what I'd like to do is call upon, I'm not sure who it is who's, Rachel, okay? Welcome to our committee meeting. And I don't know any of your group yet, but perhaps you could do some introductions for us or have them introduce themselves. And then if you have a presentation, just I'll turn the floor over to you and you can begin.
Perfect, thank you, and good evening. So my name is Rachel Redshaw. I'm from MHBC Planning. I'm a heritage planner. I'm also here with Pierre Chauvin. He's a planner at MHBC. And we also have Danielle, and she's the architect from Friat Turner Architects. So I am introducing you guys for you. So we're all here tonight. I'll be doing a brief presentation. So as mentioned, it's just sort of an overview of the HIA at this point. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm here for any questioning, as well as Pierre and Danielle. So I'm going to...
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? I see a Gillian Smith. Is that?
Yes. So Gillian Smith is
Gillian?
also... Yes, Jillian is also a planner with MHBC Planning, and she also helped with writing the report, this HIA.
Thank you.
All right. Can everybody see that all right? Yep, everything's good.
I'm assuming I don't have my full screen, but I am scanning here, and if anybody can't see it, please speak up.
Okay.
Great, go ahead, Rachel.
All right, so again, this is an overview of the HIA for 350 St. Andrews Street West in Fergus. So as Marianne mentioned, the subject property is located in Fergus. It's just south of Tower Street North. So there's an existing building on site. It's a circa 1970s modern building. And then again, to the north and south, it's adjacent to listed heritage properties. So to the north, we have the Melville United Church. It's at 300 St. Andrews Street. It was built in 1899. And it's constructed of cut stone. And then to the south, there's sort of a block of 3 buildings. So this building is at the very south end of that block. It's at the intersection of Maiden Lane and St. Andrews Street West. And it's a 2-story dwelling built in 1865, again with cut stone. Both the subject property and adjacent properties are located in a heritage area that's identified in the official plan. And they're also located within the Fergus Historical Village core cultural heritage landscape that was identified in the recent cultural heritage landscape study. So the proposed development is a 5-story commercial residential building. It has 36 units and has a 1-story underground parking structure. So if you look to the top left-hand corner, you're going to see the site plan. So the diagonal lines is indicating the location of the building. So you can actually see that there is a front yard setback there, and that was intended to reduce any impact along the streetscape. So in addition to the setback, there's also several step backs. So when we're looking at the front of the building, we have our front yard setback, and then we have a step back. So that front portion of the building ranges between 1 and 3 stories. So the 3-story height is similar to the church that you see on the north end, and then that 1-story portion is similar to the 1-story building that you see to the south of the building. They're also proposing stone veneers to be similar to the style and coloring that you would see of limestone, which is very emblematic of Elora and Fergus. So this is, again, these are some preliminary drawings here at this point. Here's some elevations, and again, you can see on the top left corner, that's your front facade. So the front portion is that stone veneer, and similar to sort of the massing and proportions that you're seeing on adjacent buildings. Now, in terms of the impact assessment, we didn't identify any adverse impacts for adjacent listed properties. Now, when we're looking at impacts, we have to look at specific impacts that are identified by the province. So we're looking at destruction, alteration, shadows, isolation, obstruction of views, a change in land use, or land disturbances. So there's no proposed destruction or alteration of either buildings. Now, when we're looking at shadowing, if you look at the 5-story portion, is there, we have if you look at the figure here, you can see that in that area, it's actually approximately 27 meters away from the church. And then the building to the south, now it's 10 meters to that one-story building, but if you actually distance it to the actual stone building of 1865, it's approximately 43 meters away. So it's quite distance away. So when we're looking at impacts of shadowing, it has to be significantly altering a heritage attribute or negating a heritage attribute. And in this case, we don't see that happening with the height of the building and also the distancing between the construction and those adjacent buildings. There's no isolation, so we're not isolating from the streetscape or the general context. There's no obstruction of views, and that's helped or supported by that setback, the front yard setback. The change of land use, so we're adding a residential use, isn't going to impact either building. And lastly, land disturbances. So there is going to be excavation because of the construction, but also there's a one-story parking garage. So when we're looking at that, the rule of thumb is the depth of excavation should be equal to the distance to the foundation. So again, when we're looking at the closest distance to the construction to that parking garage, it's approximately 22 meters from the church and approximately 43 meters to that stone building to the south. So it is a sufficient distance not to anticipate any land disturbances. And again, that's based on a technical sort of rule. It's a rule of thumb, but it's information that we get from acoustic engineers that do this all the time. So we're not anticipating any land disturbances due to construction activities. Now, in saying that, we did point out some precautionary measures. There is a stone wall to the rear. There is a small portion, approximately a meter, that is proposed to be removed, and we want to make sure that we're protecting and conserving that remaining portion of the wall. So we've provided some precautionary measures. So the first thing is ensuring that there's a minimal buffer of at least a meter between construction activities and the stone wall. We're also recommending the installation of a construction fence along the north property line. So that's for the stone wall as well as the south elevation of the church. So trying to decrease the amount of debris and dust that would be caused by the construction and trying to avoid that going towards the church. And then another measure is making sure that material storage, grading, dumping of other materials is prohibited in the immediate area of heritage resources. So we have to acknowledge that the new construction is in a heritage area and understanding that we has to be appropriate infill. So we have come up with a few recommendations. One thing is if there are going to be any barriers such as fencing, that they be consistent with the heritage character of the area. We're also encouraging vegetation to sort of ease and soften up the transition between properties, screening the mechanical box, using landscape to improve the aesthetic appearance of the front entrance. So we have that front yard setback and taking advantage of that with landscaping, and making sure that lighting of the new building doesn't detract from the church, as well as making sure that any signage is compatible with adjacent heritage buildings. So that's the end of my presentation. I was trying to just do just a brief overview of the HIA. I am here for any questions, as well as Pierre and Danielle.
Great, thank you very much. It was concise and to the point. Thank you, Rachel. I don't have my full screen back yet, but I'd like to open it up now to questions from the committee. So I think, Dawn, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay. Sherry.
Okay. Did you mention that the actual apartment will be, I guess, about 2 stories higher than the church? Is that what I understood? You said 5 stories in total, but it would be higher than the church.
So there's difference through the chair. There's different step backs. So there's different parts of the building are different heights. The highest portion would be 5 stories. So the church is about 2 to 3 stories. The tower is 3.5. It's getting, it's quite high. So the building is, that portion, the 5-story portion, is taller than the adjacent church, but there is a range of heights there, and the front portion is consistent with the adjacent buildings.
So it pretty well would be the highest building on that street then, you would say?
I might comment as well. So we don't have historical documentation of the height of the church tower. However, we did have someone go out to do drone measuring of the height of that. And actually, the tower would be higher than our building, than the highest point of it. So I think, I can't recall the exact amount, it was about 65 feet or something to the top of the tower. And our building is 17.4 meters. So yeah, I don't have that conversion in my head, but yeah.
Okay, so it's definitely lower than the tower of the church.
Yes. From the information we have, we haven't actually, physically measured the tower, but the intention is that it would be compatible with it.
Okay.
I was actually involved in work on the tower, and I believe that's about right. I came up with an RGO, rough guess only, measurement of 60 feet. So I think your drone measurement's probably close.
Yeah, and we're 57 feet.
Okay. And Aaron, I'll go to Aaron first, and then
Sure.
Kirk.
And I guess I just have some questions regarding the HIA specifically, and hopefully I'm not preempting our conversation when this is officially an item for consideration, but I was just curious why, like, there's lots of plan views, why there isn't, as shown in the presentation, sort of an elevation view showing the contextual relationship between the adjacent buildings, or sort of like a streetscape elevation with the building. And maybe even like visualizations of the relationship between the church and the building from Tower Street, sort of like what the various view sheds along St. Andrew and Tower, how that will kind of impact the streetscape. I don't know if those are forthcoming. Like, I'm not sure what the timing was of the HIA versus
it's up to,
kind of the completion of the elevations.
It's in our report pretty late. You'd have to go right into the document. I think Devlin might be able to bring that up, but I'm pretty sure that there's a streetscape in there for us. Is that true?
I
Rachel?
missed it if it was.
Yeah, it's quite a way. It's quite a ways in. Is that true, Rachel? That there's a streetscape view of some type in there?
We had like a general massing model that we did. So similar to what Aaron, and typically we actually do that. So we will have sort of massing of adjacent buildings or even the streetscape to really understand more about the size and scale and how it relates to neighboring buildings. But there was a general one at the back end in the appendix. So, but it wasn't embedded in the actual report. But I think they were still working on that because they're getting information about the height of the tower. So.
Okay.
Like I said, I saw it I did see it somewhere, but I don't remember. It must have been.
Yeah, there's a generic sort of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate diagram, but not specific to the actual church versus proposed development versus adjacent property. Can I ask another question, or I can?
Yeah, absolutely.
Skip to someone else.
Yeah. No, we've got.
Sorry,
we're good.
Rachel, you mentioned you identified that the development is within the CHL identified through the most recent study, but I believe the HIA says that it's not within a CHL. I don't know if that's just again like a timing thing. Just I know it would sort of where the HIA fell within the completion of the CHL, but that was maybe something I noted that might require an update in the HIA.
Yeah, so through the church, so during the time that we were doing the report, the study was still in progress. So we were saying, is it designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act? So at the time, it wasn't, and I believe it is just identified as a potential cultural heritage landscape, or is it designated under Part 5?
Identified. Yeah.
It's identified, but I'm just wondering if the HIA should still acknowledge that that has been identified, even though it's not designated at this point.
Yeah, so we do identify that it is within the Fergus Historical Village cultural heritage landscape. But then we have to also acknowledge that it isn't designated under Part 5 or Part 4, I guess, the subject property either. So technically it's not protected heritage property, but yes, I'll go back and just ensure, because at the time that we were writing, again, it was still in process. But yes, we do acknowledge that it's both in a heritage area and an identified potential cultural heritage landscape.
Okay, thank you.
And it's still in process at this point, so. Which, just to clarify, yeah. I think Nico had something too, I think Phil there too.
Okay.
And
yeah,
there were,
sorry.
and others before, but others before it too, I think. I'm.
Yep.
They've
Okay,
interrupted.
well, we've got lots of time here to, okay, so, Nico, did you have a question then, or a comment?
Just a point of clarification. When we discuss this at our next meeting, will the current presenters be present, or is that intended for internal discussion only? Just so that I know whether to field questions this evening or whether I can wait until the next meeting. Could we clarify that?
Yeah, and I might just on top of that, let Rachel know that we are planning on having this on our agenda at the next meeting. So you're welcome to come. We would hope you would come once we've had a chance to review this and review additional information that's being circulated. So I think that's the context of Nico's question.
Yeah, again, the reason I'm asking is because if you're not intending to be present, then I'll ask some questions this evening. If you are, then I'll hang on to those questions until the next meeting. If it's intended that we have a more fulsome discussion the next time around.
Yeah, through the chair, we do intend to be at the next meeting, and there might be a couple other people in addition to us, but we will be present at the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Nico, so you're happy with that, or did you have any comments or anything? I think one of the things I was going to suggest is we can also submit questions, but go ahead.
Perhaps there is a question that we may consider for discussion at the next meeting. The HIA on page 40, it indicates that this AHIA concludes that the subject property has no cultural heritage value or interest. I just wondered on what basis you make that determination. What elements do you take into consideration to make that statement?
Yeah, through the chair. So we did do a sort of a mini analysis of the existing building because it's older than 40 years old. So, and it's an unusual building. So we want to understand if it had any significance, if there was any significant architect or anything like that. So we did do a review of the building. We went inside and took photos on the exterior. We did some research to see who was the architect. It wasn't a notable architect or identified as a notable architect. We did review the history. There were some associations. That has to be we're using the Ontario Regulation 906 because that's what we're required to use to evaluate cultural or determine cultural heritage value or interest. So it has to have a direct association with the property. So there was some indirect associations with, there was Norman McCraig. I don't know if any history buffs know, but he was involved in the military, so sort of associated with the former drill hall. But again, that wasn't direct with the existing building on site. And then we looked at the context. Well, the building is circa 1970s, modern, sort of different building. It wasn't really fitting in with the context. It wasn't really supporting the context. So the three categories, essentially what we're looking at is number one, the physical design value, number two, historical associative value, and number three, contextual value. So through that evaluation, we determined that the property does not have significant cultural heritage or value.
All right, I'll save the remainder of my questions for the next time around. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico, for that. I don't see anyone. Kirk, right, go ahead.
Thanks, Phil. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I guess this one may be for Mariana, I guess. For heritage impact assessment, is a standard practice to only do the impact with the buildings next door and not the whole designated heritage area? I mean, this impacts a lot more than just two buildings. It impacts all of downtown Fergus. And should it not be all part of the impact assessment?
Thanks for the question. I'll try to clarify. So under provincial policy, an impact assessment can be requested when the development is adjacent to protected heritage property. So in this case, we actually don't have protected heritage properties adjacent. They're listed. That's not considered protected under the Heritage Act, and by definition, under the provincial policy statement, is designated. So in this case, that's what would be determined or identified through a heritage impact assessment. Anything else outside of that is a little bit more not as clear. So in this case, when we talk about the surrounding area, so the heritage area policies in terms of downtown heritage area, like we have in both Elora and Fergus, we look at, they're not protected heritage areas. So the policy tests there are less stringent. Even with the cultural heritage landscape study and that identified area that has been identified as significant through council direction, however, not protected as of yet. So again, the policy tests on impacts are difficult to measure. I think that in this case, if the committee feels that the cultural heritage landscape that's been identified and the preliminary heritage attributes that have been identified are worth reviewing in terms of impacts, that's something that we could probably discuss, talk about to see if there's any merit in reviewing that. But outside of protected heritage properties, heritage impact assessments wouldn't necessarily, because a heritage impact assessment by definition looks at the proposed plans specifically in terms of what is proposed to be located on this parcel and how it specifically impacts the properties around it. So in that case, limited to any protected heritage properties around it. I think you're referring to more impacts on the downtown in terms of overall height, and that's different. That gets assessed maybe through the design brief. I don't think it would actually get captured through a heritage impact assessment unless we request that specifically.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Thanks very much, Phil. So given that this has been identified as a high priority for the cultural heritage landscape study, and given that the cultural heritage landscape study, the Heritage Committee has agreed to move downtown Fergus and Elora higher in the list of priorities for the cultural landscape study, would you not suggest that maybe this whole thing is premature? We have to wait. I mean, there's not going to be any cultural heritage left if we let this first one go through with a 5-story building. By the time we finally get to a cultural heritage landscape study for downtown Fergus, there's going to be 5-story buildings the whole length of that street. We're getting the cart way before the horse on this. And I really think there has to be a way, and whether it's a heritage impact assessment or whether it's just slow down and wait for the cultural heritage landscape study, we have to do something to slow this down, because we're trying to rush this through before the landscape study and a potential heritage conservation district is identified, which is really the only way to identify or to protect the landscape of downtown Fergus and downtown Elora. So, I just think we're really stepping down a slippery slope if we let this go.
Do you want me to comment, Phil, briefly?
Yeah, I think just a short comment. I think those are, great sentiments to express there, Kurt, in terms of where I think the general feeling is on this, certainly. I'm not speaking for the committee, but I think, I think there's a great deal of appreciation for for your point of view on this. And, but not to start a general discussion on that tonight, but certainly to put it out there that that's one of the considerations that we're certainly going to have to respond to. Mariana, go ahead.
Just briefly to touch on timing, while I appreciate those comments, unfortunately, when an application is received, we must process it. So we're talking about very long-term plans and broad plans to protect our cultural heritage in the township. We're talking about potential heritage conservation districts, more designations, cultural heritage landscapes. So all of those things, as we know, take time to do, and you can't put an application on hold once it's received. The only way to do that is through an interim control bylaw over an entire area. And we talked about this a few times now at council and at other meetings. So there are a few very limited tools in terms of putting things on hold, but if you're talking about freezing development until we make other decisions or projects come to fruition, it's a very difficult thing to do, to try to stop or freeze development, to wait for other things to happen. And however, having said that, there are policies currently in place that protect heritage, and we still work within that realm with listed and designated properties and heritage impact assessments. So each application is always regarded or evaluated based on its own merits every time it's received. There is a larger context, yes, but we also have to review the application that is received when it's received and process it accordingly. Or the applicant has the ability to appeal that to the land tribunal if it's not considered in time, sort of as per Planning Act timelines. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Kurt. I just want to remind folks that this is an information item tonight. So we're not here to create recommendations or policy, but yeah, go ahead, Nico. I think you and then Don.
I understand that this is not up for fulsome discussion, but I want to pick up on Kirk's commentary. There is also a community planning permit system that has just been talked about at council, and that is up for further consideration. Part of that CPPS system is that it requires an official plan amendment, as well as an amendment to the or creation of a bylaw. If those CPPS discussions are going to occur in relatively short order, which I hope they will, does this not prejudice those discussions to some degree? Because part of that process is also getting the community involved and public involved in terms of discussions, which would seemingly regulate some of the ways that building happens in our downtown. So I'm really concerned about decisions being made currently that would have such an impact on prejudicing those discussions if precedent is already being set in advance of those discussions.
Okay, so
just simply my
yeah, and I think it's important to you've put that out there, Nico, and I think the committee needs to understand what that actually means going forward, and in the context of our discussions or our information item here tonight, I think they need to take that back and consider how that could be incorporated into a recommendation that would eventually go to council. Is that what I think that's where we're heading, that we would make a either to approve or to endorse the information in this heritage impact assessment, or to indicate that we're not in agreement with it. I think those are our two options. Eventually, after a discussion, and the two items and the point of view that both you and Kirk had put forward here would be part of that. Without meaning to take the last word, is there anyone else who has a clarification of? No, okay. I think, I think this is good because we, Kirk, to speak to your point, we also have started the discussion here when we've kind of signaled some of our concerns. And it's going to take, we have some time now. And perhaps I could just ask Mariana, if she has 1 minute, you could just perhaps give us, in closing, what the timeline is going to be then going forward for the committee in order to stay ahead of this process.
Sure, thanks. We don't have an actual date set yet for the public meeting. Well, we anticipate probably setting that up soon. We would let the committee know when that public meeting will be held. Again, all comments can be provided to staff and to council at that meeting. And then I imagine it wouldn't take place before this next committee's meeting. So because they're scheduled typically at the end of every month, it's not going to happen in January. So at the earliest at this point, it would likely happen at the end of February or later. So this meeting will happen, this committee's next meeting will happen prior to that. So there's some opportunity for further discussion. And then if the committee wishes to make some formal comments to staff and council at the public meeting or separate from the public meeting that need to be considered through the consideration of this application by staff, then that would, there's opportunity to do that still. And this committee could also delegate at the council meeting, at the public meeting at council, if they choose to. And if the committee has questions, we can provide those to the consultants so they can clarify through answers back. And they already advised that they would be at the next meeting. So some of those questions can be provided in advance of the meeting and then can be clarified at the meeting if there are any further questions that arise. And I think that's it, but I think Pierre has a comment here.
Absolutely, Pierre, we haven't heard from you yet tonight.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm a partner with MHPC Planning, and for some of you that attended the informal meeting, I gave the presentation there, and Danielle was there as well. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight, and I view this as really an opportunity because if we're coming back in, say, a month's time, if there's anything that you want us to look into between now and then, by all means, I guess you can funnel those questions through to Mariana, and we can come back with some answers to help with that discussion in a month's time. Like, I've made some notes on some things already. Somebody mentioned doing a massing model. We've done that. We can certainly provide that. We can come back and confirm the building heights for you with respect to the exact heights with respect to the church and our building. We have our own opinions with respect to the sort of the discussion on proceeding in advance of some of these other studies, but we can certainly provide some of our comments with respect to that. But if there's anything else, by all means, we'd be happy to entertain those comments. So we're here to work with you and try to facilitate the discussion as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pierre. And I think with that, I can just wrap up by saying thank you to Rachel and to Danielle and Jillian for being here, and just thank you for having attended this evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Were you going to say anything there, Rachel, or were you?
I was just going to say thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and thank you for helping us get this process started. Okay. Well, say good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Unfortunately, I have to leave now.
We understand. Thank you
But
for your attendance, Mariana, and your input. We really
No problem. And I think everybody, the subcommittees can speak to the updates that we've been working on. So
Yeah.
if there's any questions, though, feel free to email or text me. I'll still be available that way
Okay.
while
And I
I'm in
think,
this other meeting.
oh, okay. And throughout then the balance, and there'll be some other things that information that's, I noticed something came across our my email just before the meeting started on a submission from the public on 350 St. Andrews Street. So that will be something that you can all, we perhaps send some information out on that and how we'll incorporate that into the next, just to finish off that last portion there. Okay, thanks, Mariana. Let you go.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
So subcommittee reports, Public Relations, Education Subcommittee, and that's Christine, and I think also Nanette.
Did we have another information item though?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, we do, yeah, and we were
Sorry,
gonna.
Phil. Sorry.
No, good point. Call me out. No, good point. It's the ACO Heritage Week actions, and I believe, I don't have them actually in front of me. That was basically from Beverly, giving us some information on the activities of the ACO during Heritage Week. And she had a correction, I believe, Devlin, that you, to the dates, which you distributed.
Yes, she just wanted to indicate that their survey will begin the week prior to Heritage Week on February 18th.
Okay.
The original communication said the 21st.
Okay, so that information is there, and I don't have it in front of me, but I don't know if you wanted to just read it. Or if it's sufficient, we've all been able to read it there, so it's in the agenda. Does that suffice there, Don?
Yeah. I think there was something
Thanks.
about
Yeah.
February 10th in there or something too. I'm not sure what the date was. I think February 10th, maybe.
Well, she made a change to the dates.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
what we're talking about. Is the 18th.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, great. Thanks.
So that information is in the agenda, and thank you to Beverly Cairns for forwarding that to us and keeping us up to date. And from Christine, we're going to hear, I guess, about some of the information or some of the activities that we have also been working on for Heritage Week.
We have, can you hear me all?
Perfect.
Thank you. Nanette, Mariana, and I met online today, and we solidified 4 candidates for awards, and a 5th one we're getting more information about before we decide on that. We've got a timeline of getting newspaper article out and notification to our recipients, and Mariana will do the framing of the certificates as appropriate. And Nanette, did I forget anything there?
We had, I don't know, I missed the beginning of the meeting, so I don't know if Mariana had mentioned moving the Heritage Centre Wellington meeting to the 15th.
Thank you. She did not. Yes.
Okay. So we wanted to bring that to the table just to propose moving the monthly meeting from the 8th of February to the 15th. We just wanted to put it out and see what committee members thought of that. The reason that we want to do it is it flows better into Heritage Week, because we will be that's when we'll do the presentation, will be the 15th of February, and then the week after is the beginning of Heritage Week. So we just wanted to put that out there to the committee to see if everyone would be available to change the meeting.
Yeah, I think, is that something, any concerns about that for anyone? I think it does make sense to move the meeting for that reason, to push it a week. So if we can just agree to do that, then Devlin, can you reschedule?
Thank you.
For the 15th of February?
It also gives us more working time to get all the A, Bs, and Cs in order. So we would appreciate that.
Okay,
And Phil, we're going to give you, of course, the names, and we'll get Devlin to invite our recipients to our virtual meeting, and we'll give you some talking points as well.
okay, excellent. That's great. I'm looking forward to
We assumed that you'd be the grand poobah in giving out the awards. We're very excited about this year's proposed recipients.
I'd be more than happy. That would be an honor. Thank you, Christine. Nico, go ahead.
Can we just be sure that the MHBC presenters that were here this evening have that time available to them? If we're going to have this discussion at the next meeting, I want to make sure that they're given a heads up as well. And because if they can't all attend, then that might create a problem. So I just wondered, if Devlin, if we could just make sure that we canvass those individuals to make sure that they're present.
We'll reach out to them in the morning and let you guys know as soon as possible.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. Good point. Good catch, as we used to say. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much, Nanette and Christine and Mariana for doing that work, because there's a lot of background work involved in compiling the awards. So we appreciate that, as well as the publicity aspects and media aspects of it. Okay, so we'll look forward to that for next month, with confirmation of the meeting shift or change from Devlin in a day or two. Okay, so designation property subcommittee report. Is there anything for this month, Aaron? I know it's
we have no major items to report this month. We did meet last week and we kind of came up with a work plan for the year. So we've got a handful of properties that we're pursuing, but hopefully in the next month or two, we're able to come back to the committee with some more, I guess, tangible updates for some of those properties.
okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the Municipal Register Subcommittee, we did have an in-person meeting scheduled, which we were forced to cancel, and then we rescheduled our Zoom meetings for later in the month. It'll sort of be a technical issue to see how that works. It'll be our first Zoom meeting where we're able to look at photographs and have the discussion about properties at the same time. So see how that works and get started on that. And I'm not sure, did the Bridge Subcommittee have any updates for us this month?
We are meeting Thursday. So last time I think Dawn reported to you that we have to do our work plan idea, and we were going to be photographing bridges. We gave ourselves till the summer to get that completed, and with Mariana's help, we were going to have that posted onto something magical. Well, I just don't know the terms that Marianne was going to. There's some database that Marianne was going to add information to.
Yeah, it's a GIS system, the one that we do with the
registry.
The registry.
Yeah. Well, that's great, because you have a well-qualified individual now on your committee who can help you with that too. So
I wanted to add just a couple more things, Christine.
Yeah, of course.
And thanks to Nanette and Mariana meeting all about this too. We do have a meeting coming up, but there's some stuff that's certainly going to be coming on our radar very soon. The Pier Point Bridge, I don't know, obviously a lot of that coming, so that may become part of our look in the new year. And the other is the Millbrook Bridge. Kurt made me aware of it just more recently, and I think Council Kurt, if I'm correct, is looking at reconsidering, which means that it will be definitely coming our way again in the this coming year, I'm sure. Is that true, Kirk? Is that the place that we're at now with that?
Basically, the council agreed with my motion to reconsider, but at the moment, the only reconsideration stipulation, I guess, is that staff are going back to Woolwich Council because this is a joint bridge, and so they have to get Woolwich to also reconsider. So until they get that agreement, there's really nothing very active happening, if you like. I think that support from Heritage Center Wellington would be great. One of the issues that I had mentioned to you is that the recommendation from the Regional Waterloo Heritage Committee to save that bridge was never presented to our council, so we weren't aware of that when the original decision was made. I don't know if Woolwich Council was aware of it or not. So that to me is a red flag that we really need to consider and going forward. So that's where it sits, though. Our staff has to contact Woolwich staff, and heaven only knows what'll happen there.
Yeah, but it is something that might be coming to our committee. So something for all of us to be aware of. And
Marianne is obviously she's not here with us now.
we'll learn more obviously in the coming months.
Yeah, I would think she would have had some information for us on that too. Christine?
Mariana at one of our recent meetings was mentioning that she might be turning bridges over to Stephanie Rossi, as bridges are part of her regular workday, and Mariana would just be supporting our education committee and then this committee as a whole. That's my understanding.
Okay. Well, as in terms of communicating between, she may still be involved just in terms of communicating between staff from different municipalities.
Yeah.
On that, if that's what's needed. Okay. Well, thank you for bringing that information to us, Kurt and Don and Christine. Thank you, and Net for your work on that committee as well. I mean, I know you're just starting out. But clearly it's important work. So Nico.
I could just make one comment under the subcommittee update profile.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I completely.
Not.
No, I didn't see. Okay.
Related, yeah. Not related to any of what's there, but I noticed that healthy growth is not on there, and even though healthy growth may not have had a meeting, it doesn't necessarily mean that as a representative of Heritage Center Wellington on that committee, that I, as a member of that of Heritage Center Wellington, may not be struggling with issues that I want to pass by this committee. So I just want to make sure that healthy growth is there as a standing item for that very reason. And I mean, I can go into further details in terms of what I'm struggling with, but I'm happy to do that at the next meeting as well, if we could be sure that that's there as a standing item.
Yeah, I think was that an oversight? Because I know you have had maybe
we haven't had a meeting, but as I say, that it doesn't necessarily mean that there may not be things that I might be struggling with.
Well, that happens with some of our
on that committee.
Yeah, sure. So, Devlin, did you have any additional info on that?
I can make sure that it's on there, regardless if there's a meeting or not. I generally just remove the heading if there's not been a meeting.
Yeah. Okay. So it'll be a standing item, and then if there's been no meeting, you can just let us know.
That's
one
right.
way or the other. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it might be appropriate in information items as a standing item. Maybe the first one all the time, 7.1.
Well, I don't know. Why don't we leave?
Well, you can work it out.
Lisa and Devlin to figure out, and then
generally it would be the last information item or after the two items that we had today.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll leave it up to you guys to figure that out, and then, but it should be a standing item somewhere on our agenda, just as the other subcommittee reports are. Is that fair enough, Nico?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
As I say, I'm prepared to elaborate now, but I can wait till next.
Well, I mean, we do actually have some. We're at 7:12. And we're at the end of our allotted agenda times, and I was going, or items, and I was going to just about say if there is no other business. So perhaps this would be a good opportunity for you to bring some of that, because we're not under a time crunch right now. So if the committee is okay with it, maybe you could go ahead and we could have a bit of a.
Yeah, let's hear the business, extra business.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you what I struggle with. The issue of height on healthy growth is something that is becoming more and more profound. And I think ultimately what will happen at the Healthy Growth Committee is that a height of 5 stories will be looked at, or may be looked at, as becoming the norm. I have my own prejudices when it comes to the issue of height, not in a general sense, only as pertains to the heritage areas identified in the official plan, and where those heritage areas are overlapped by the cultural heritage landscape study. So I want to be sure that people understand that I'm not opposed to infill. I'm not opposed to affordable housing, attainable housing. I'm certainly in support of all of that. This particular issue pertains to height only. And it becomes increasingly difficult for me not to have the opinion of the full committee when it comes to the issue of height. I can put my own prejudices out there, but they may not necessarily be reflective of the committee's opinion as to the issue of height. So I just want to put it out there that I don't think it's in the committee's best interest to stay silent on the issue of height in those areas that I've identified. So whether we talk about this tonight, or whether the Heritage Committee goes and makes some consideration as to what position it wishes to adopt in preparation for the next meeting, that would be fine as well. But I do want you to know, as a committee, that I do struggle with the issue of height. And as I say, I have my own prejudices, but those prejudices may not necessarily reflect the opinion of this committee. So I think it's important that I put my own prejudices aside and make sure that what I'm putting out there at Healthy Growth is an accurate reflection of the opinion of this committee. And that's basically what I'm struggling with. So there you have it. Whether we talk about it now or whether we talk about it at the next meeting, that's entirely up to the committee.
Well, thank you, Nico, because I think that sort of cuts to the heart of some of the issues that we're going to be asked to deal with in the future, as the issue that Kirk is alluding to. And I think, if I don't want to speak for Mariana, but I know Mariana has time and again said that, we deal with these, or we're required to deal with them on these issues as they're brought forward. But and therefore we deal with them as on a one-to-one individual basis, as we're about to do with this property on St. Andrews Street. But I also think I understand your conflicts, or conflict that you're dealing with, in that there are, it's an overriding issue of height, especially within the cultural heritage landscape areas that have been designated. So I think for me, the question is, what is the process or means by which we would express this opinion? And I don't understand what that, I don't know what that is at this point.
Yeah,
well, the thing is that in the official plan, a current height limit of 3 stories, I believe, is what's been identified. I don't think it would be beyond the scope of this committee to want to stick to that in those areas that I've identified, because it already exists. It already exists in the official plan. So whether an official plan amendment is forthcoming at some point to take into consideration 5 stories as being the norm, does this committee want to maintain adherence to the current 3 stories that are currently already identified within the official plan.
Okay, and I don't think, I think that's, can that be, is that a rhetorical question for tonight? Like, in other words, you know, I'm not sure we can have that discussion in a meaningful way tonight. Except if people want to comment on it, I'm sure, you know. Don, I'm just looking for a direction now. What do you want to do?
Maybe Devlin
Devlin?
first. I think Devlin maybe first, and I'll comment after.
I just think before the committee goes too far down this rabbit hole or has too much of a discussion, it would be better if Mariana was here because of her knowledge of the official plan and zoning and things like that, where Lisa and I really can't provide that expertise to you.
Yeah, and I think that,
I just wanted to put my struggle out there.
sure. And I think that again it's important because we can't come up with answers if we don't know what the questions are. And you've really asked a good question in the form of similar to what Kirk has also expressed, which is, you know, where do we stand on height? So I appreciate you, Nico, bringing that forward to the committee. And I think we need this, we'll obviously be asking to consider it. And again, I say, what is the process or the means by which we are going to express that opinion? And how do we create a recommendation that would be useful going forward? Kirk?
Thanks, Philip. Thank you for bringing this forward, Nico, because that, as you already know, that's my struggle as well. I guess my concern is by not having the discussion any more detail tonight, Devlin, we're going to go into the next meeting a month from now where this same topic is going to come back to us for 350 St. Andrew Street without a committee direction, if you like. And so I'm just wondering if there's something that can happen in between. We know how Nico feels about it. We know how I feel about it. And it would be wonderful if we had some committee direction on, you know, do we want to preserve the heritage conservation, heritage landscapes as 3 stories, the same as our urban design guidelines and our official plan. I mean, that's the documentation is already there. And really all we're doing is saying that we agree with what's already in place and we don't want to change that for the heritage areas. And that seems to me that doesn't require a whole lot of detailed knowledge about the official plan. That's my take. And I'm sorry if I spoke out of tune.
No, I recognize you. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, mine was from a bit earlier, but it is very similar to what Kirk and Nico were saying, and it depends on where we go with it. And I mean, there's so many moving parts. Councils, I don't know if they have to amend the official plan to make 5 stories possible. I think Kirk could talk more about that maybe in our next time we're together. But maybe even a broader HIA of the entire core areas on shadows, so that council has something for the future to look at whenever this issue comes up. There's lots of things for us to consider, and I think that Nico's got us thinking and Kirk's got us thinking, and we certainly can address it the next time. But the other thing to consider is to look at maybe a broader HIA, not just as individual buildings, but that might come more with the cultural heritage landscape. But unfortunately, as Kirk knows too, these wheels move very slowly, and that's going to be a few years before all of that's done. So in the short term, it's difficult to see what's going to happen. But I think a broader maybe vision from our committee and a suggestion to say an HIA on shadows in heritage areas might be worth a study. Just an idea to consider.
Yeah, and I think that if I can then, yeah, I think that's a fair point, Don. Did anybody else? I want to give everybody a chance to either say, to speak to this now, or just, I don't think personally it's wrong to actually say, we've indicated that we do want to revisit this in the next meeting. So I don't think we should create a false sense of urgency on having this discussion at this point in terms of coming up with conclusions. I'm not saying we shouldn't be discussing it. I'm just saying that there are many things to consider and more information to be gathered in putting together our recommendations, which we are well out ahead of right now in terms of, so I'm not sure what any conclusion or coming up to some sort of trying to come up to some kind of a discussion or conclusion tonight or recommendation would, if that would serve any good purpose. Christine?
If I might just ask us to give our opinions on like a general statement, not to make a general statement. Are we all in support of the 3 stories and the official plan, and that's our guiding principle going forward until something more fulsome? Could we see what we're all thinking?
Like are you talking about like some sort of a vote or?
Yeah, like, well, what is everybody thinking? Is 3 stories where they want to go? They want to support the plan.
Yeah, Nico?
Christine, I want to thank you for that, and I certainly do want to elicit everyone's opinion. My reason for putting it out there this evening, and I'm glad it will be on the agenda for the next time around, but it's a very important issue, and I think it's something that people maybe need a little bit of time to think about. So, and I do think that we should do a canvassing of how people are feeling, but if people want a month to sort of think about this, and I mean, I wouldn't necessarily I didn't want to just dump this on everybody tonight, asking for, a round table discussion. I just wanted to put my struggle out there and give people an opportunity to consider it. But I do think that a canvassing of people's overall opinion is going to be sort of the order of the day, whether it's this evening or next week. But if people want a month to consider their opinion, then that would be fine as well, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so and I think that's where we should leave it then. There will be ample opportunity for folks to put forward their ideas and support whatever height level we think is.
Bill?
Yep.
Can I just ask a question too? So I'm just wondering why 5 stories are being considered.
Okay,
when,
so I think at this point we, I feel like we are going down a rabbit hole now. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say why are 5 stories being considered for downtown new developments when the official plan states 3? I'm not sure. I don't understand.
So those questions are exactly the questions then that we need to forward in our emails to Mariana, who will then forward them to the consultants. So that's perhaps the best example of a question which I don't think there's anybody here who has the expertise to answer that. So it becomes
and I put 5 stories out there, but I don't know where it ultimately will come to rest, but I do believe that it will probably be in advance of the 3 stories currently identified.
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, it's an elementary basic question. Why 5 stories? Why are we picking 5 stories? And why is 5 stories? Why are they pushing for 5 stories when it says 3? So
I think, I think in the past, we've had 3 buildings now that have been proposing 5 stories, or they've been on the table somewhere. So maybe that's where it's coming from. I don't know.
Okay. So can people do that? Forward whether it's Nico?
I'm sorry to take up so much time, but I think that's a really good, just to follow up on what Nanette was suggesting. When I started this meeting off and I asked for clarification on the notice of planning applications, and just so that it could be sure that it was minuted. None of us are planners, and I had thought that it might be a good idea at some point to get our planning department out to give us a fulsome presentation about where they're headed in terms of their thinking, and also to talk about where the intersection points are between planning and heritage. I would like to put that out there as well, just in follow-up to what Nanette was saying, that another thing maybe that we can all look at considering, would it be, none of us, as I say, none of us are planners, would it be good for the planning department to come out to the Heritage Committee to give a presentation as to where they're headed and what the rationale for some of their thinking is, and to educate us on how they move an application forward from receipt to ultimate completion. So that's another recommendation that I have, and something that else that perhaps this committee might want to consider to do a better workshop.
So perhaps, Devlin, how is this discussion going to be recorded in the minutes?
This is something I'll talk to Mariana about. It's not really something I can say, hey, come on out to the meeting. She would have to review that with her staff as well.
No, what I'm wondering, yeah, but like the general discussion, since we were about to adjourn the meeting, based on having some extra time and the willingness of the committee, I'm just wondering if we can have several points mentioned. One of them being that Nico has suggested this as a something, and also the general question of as pertains to height. But I think, Nanette, you should submit that question separately, if you would. And just the idea that the committee would like to know or understand what the process is by which we can express our opinion. And I think Mariana would say it is through the HIA, but I think we're looking for something broader than that.
I think a workshop, I think, is what it sounds like. Does that make sense, Nico? Yeah. Maybe a request for a workshop on that process.
Yeah. But also, I think we'll be looking for some way that we can express our opinion on height in a more general.
Yeah, that's a totally, I was only speaking just to Nico's last point.
Sure. Right.
Just for clarification. Yeah.
Sherry?
Sorry. Yeah, I'd like to know sort of too is when the planning department made the decision that it was going to be 3 stories, how long has that been in effect for? Because my feeling is now that we're starting to see all these people wanting to do 5 stories, was it ever not 3 stories? Maybe it was 1 story at one time and then they changed it and said, okay, now we're going to make the maximum 3 stories. And now we're starting to see people pushing those boundaries and starting to say, well, okay, it's been 3 for this amount of years. Now are we going to say, let's push the boundaries and go to 5 stories? I'm just wondering if it's always been 3 stories or has it been changed? I don't know who can tell us that. I'm sure the planning department, I guess.
I'm sure Mariana has the information to, again, so it's a simple email. And
Lisa has her hand up too.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Lisa next. Yep.
Sorry, Phil, I think you were going down the same route that I was going to. A lot of these are general official plan questions and planning application questions, and who can apply for an official plan amendment with their applications and how that works, somewhat outside of heritage. And I also would just note that our planning department consists of 3 people. So Mariana can likely answer most of these questions on her own, but the committee seems to be asking for some general information on how the planning process works. So if that's something the committee would like, they could ask for to give us some direction, or we could speak to Mariana and see if there's something we can circulate to help people understand moving forward. Even the Planning Association might have some information to show, better explain how planning applications work. Like Devlin said, I don't think it's appropriate for him or I to fully answer questions because neither of us are professional planners and to explain this process in great detail.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to I'm trying to wrap this up because it's about a 20-minute discussion, which I think has been very good. And we've got some information that we can take back both to Mariana and also that we can submit to the consultants specifically regarding building height and so on. Kirk, as the last, I'll give you the last word. If you're
Thank you, Phil. I didn't really have anything much to say except to answer Sherry's question. The 3-story height restriction has been in place since amalgamation, but from both Elora and Fergus came with 3-story height restrictions. So that's not something that's new at all. It's something that's been around for 21 years now, I guess, since amalgamation. So if that helps.
Yeah, that's great to have that background.
Yeah, and my feeling is it's been around for 20, but what was it prior to that? Was there any time when it was not even 3 stories, it was even less?
Then that's a perfect, I think Mariana will be able to probably give us the history on that as well.
We have 3-story 19th century buildings throughout the community too, right?
Yeah.
So that can answer your question, maybe right there, right? So.
And church steeples are allowed to go above 3 stories.
Yeah.
But sure, okay. Well, thank you then for that, and we'll itemize some of the items then that were discussed and the points raised and have them on the minutes in some form. Devlin? Yep, okay. Good, thank you, everybody. Good meeting tonight from a couple different points of view. We heard from a different couple points of view, and there's some work to be done in between now and the next meeting. So thank you in advance for that, and also looking forward to whatever 2022 brings. So we'll see you next month. And with that, I adjourn the meeting for tonight. Night, folks.